In the pre-dawn murk of the Ypres salient, where Belgium's clay soil holds water like a grudge eternal, Private Tommy Atkins stirs in his funk hole a hasty burrow gouged into the trench wall, its sandbag crown sagging under the night's relentless downpour, walls weeping rivulets that pool ankle-deep on the duckboard floor, black and viscous as the salient's own blood. The air clings heavy, a miasma of sodden wool, rotting sandbags, and the faint, sickly sweet of chlorine ghosts from 15's first gasp, seeping through the gas curtain's frayed edge like unbidden memories. Tommy's greatcoat, stiffened to armor by layers of blue-gray mud, Passchendaele's pillbox porridge, they call it, a slurry that sucks men under like quicksand, wraps him tight, shared with 3 mates in this coffin-cramped bay, scarce 5 feet by 7, props of splintered timber creaking like a dying man's rasp under the earth's indifferent weight. Snores rasp from Harry, the grizzled corporal from Manchester's docks, dreaming perhaps of Mersey tides. Young Billy, farm boy fresh from Wiltshire's downs, curls fetal against the seep, his small box respirator a bulbous horror of khaki flannel and glass eyepieces dangling from a nail like a blinded cyclops, primed for the Phosgene's apple scent that drifts unheralded on the wind. The rotation's third dawn here in the front line, a 4-day sentence before relief slugs up from the rear in relief's ragged file, but time dissolves in the salient's perpetual twilight, where fog and falling walls blur hours to haze. Tommy's eyes crack open to the gloom, joints locking in protest from night's immobility, trench foot's insidious throb a swollen heat and soles turned white and puckered whispering of the sawbone's blade if the issue's puttees don't dry, though in Ypres deluge, they never do. No bugle dares revelie's brazen cry, too rich a lure for Fritz's snipers perched in ruined farms. It's the runner's hissed relay that rouses the platoon, past bay to bay like a smuggled woodbine. Stand to, lads, stand to in 10. Pulses quick and subtle beneath the khaki, for dawns the salient's sly assassin, when mist veils the raid's creep, German Jaegers slithering from their wire with entrenching tools honed to daggers, the fog a conspirator in the close quarters kill. Tommy fumbles for his boots, ammo boots laced with whalebone whittles slick as eels, while outside, the trench awakens a cacophony muted, coughs hacking wet, oaths swallowed, feet sloshing on duckboards that span the sump pits, those watery oubliettes where rats swarm in pink-eyed legions, tails lashing the surface like whips. Passchendaele's autumn 17 weighs heavier than loose dust, the salient's curve a meat grinder since Haig's third Ypres push 5 months of mud and misery claiming 500,000, mates pulped in the wire or drowned in shell holes turned lakes, but the routine endures, a bulwark against the madness tide. Tommy shoulders his SMLE, bolt greased with axle grease against rust's siege, and crawls the traverse to the fire step, the dugout's lintel grazing scalp like fate's low beam, emerging into the parapet's fog-shrouded fold where mist rolls thick, cloaking no man's land in a merciful amnesia. The salient bites deep here, German lines a spectre 80 yards off, concertina wire drowning in mud like a serpent's failed molt, craters brimming with the weak sun recovered. Breathe with him now, listener, feel the fog's damp caress on skin, the greatcoat's sodden hug a grounding weight, easing thoughts toward the stand to solemn right. But as the runner's whisper slices the mist like a bayonet's edge, the rifles rise, and the line awakens to greet the dawn's veiled threat. The fire step, a precarious perch of warped plank atop the parapet, seizes Tommy now, his frame wedging into the traverse's crook where sandbags bulge like bloated sentinels, their burlap skins ruptured by shrapnel's kiss, clay oozing like pus from wounds unbandaged. Bayonet clipped with a suppressed click, its triangular blade a grim relic of Zulu charges, thirsty for the rare melee though most stands end and glares across the sludge. Tommy cradles the SMLE across thighs, stock scarred from bayonet drills in Etaple's mud, foresight pinned on the wire's drowned coils where rain beads like futile tears. The platoon mans the line in spectral outline, 18 khaki phantoms strung along this bulge of the salient's festering arc, rifles sanctified nightly with gun oil's ritual sheen against the damp's corrosion, for a frozen bolt mid-scramble spells the reaper's lottery. Stenta clings from 0430 to 0530, This fog-veiled right a legacy of second Ypres gas-haunted 15, when dawn patrols ghosted from the mist, Fritz's Sturmtruppen in field-grey wraiths, stick grenades arcing like vengeful comets. No larks herald the light here, the salient's hush magnifies the petty fiends, a rat's plunge into sump, bold as a staff walla, the plink of runoff from a tin-roofed dugout, coughs cascading the line like contagion's chain. Tommy squints through the fog's woolen folds, periscope a trench mirror tube wrapped in khaki rag to mute the lift hoisted wary to carve the skyline sans silhouette's doom, for Prussian marksmen lurk in splintered barns, Mausers zeroed on any crown's bold tilt. No man's land sprawls drowned before him, 90 yards of apocalypse's sketch, shell craters gaping like the salient's maw, some flooded to lip with rainwater curdled by the fallen leech, others shallow mires that trap the unwary in thigh-deep doom, wire festooned with tatters of greatcoat and feldgrau, rags sodden and swaying like drowned flags, stumps of blasted poplars clawing skyward, echoes of pre-war groves now charnel thickets. Mind meanders in the vigil's void, to Mum's parcel of socks knitted tight, her keep dry, love a jest in Ypres flood, to the Lancashire loom's steady clack, a cadence kinder than the Lewis gun's chatter. Post-Passchendaele's quagmire, where Haig's autumn offensive churned the earth to a sea that claimed more in suction than shot, tanks bogged like iron hippos, Tommy's vanishing mid-charge sentries bear the salient's curse, eyes straining for the ripple that betrays the saphead's rise. Corporal Harry, mustache beaded with mist, pads the step, his eyes peeled. Atkins, no noddin' for Jerry's peepers, half gruff, half grateful, Webley holstered like a dark vow at belt. Whispers thread the line, Billy frets of flares burst might paint them for the Maxim's harvest, Harry jests of home-brewed tea post stand to. The fog thins grudging, east bleeding peach through the grey, the all-clear's breath sighing soft, no creep this morn, just the wind's wail hauling faint Heimat from across the sludge, a mutual moan in the impasse. Relief laps subtle, rifles eased but vigilant, the line exhaling as one, mist parting to a sun that mocks with no heat, only to steam the mud to rising specters. Tommy flexes chilled fingers, the SMLE's walnut warming reluctant, pulses flutter melting to the trench's primal throb. Feel it ebb in you too, listener, the mist's slow retreat a tender unfurl, rifles heft a meditative stay, drawing eyelids toward that first, tepid draft of char. With the all-clear's gentle grace, hunger rouses like kin, breakfast simmers in the lifting fog, calling the platoon from vigil's brink. Ambient sounds transition, the stanta's hushed rifles melt into a soft, bubbling simmer of billy cans over braziers, rain's patter easing to a misty veil that mists the parapet's edge, faint clinks of mess tins joining the fog's hush. Dawn's fog lifts reluctant, listener, the vigil's wire-taut hush yields to morning's sodden right, char's steam rising like a prayer for warmth in the salient's chill. Let the billy's bubble draw you nearer, easing into the meager comforts of the bay, *. The all-clear's breath threads the line like smuggled solace, rifles eased from shoulders with the sigh of unbent bows, the fire steps grip loosening as the platoon shuffles down the traverse, a labyrinth of sandbag baffles zigzagging against enfilades sweep into the bay's relative haven, where funkholes hunker like drowned rats, their tarpaulin flaps dripping rivulets that snake the duckboards. Reveille dares no bugle's brazen peal in Ypres earshot, too rich a beacon for Fritz's Maxims perched in shell-shattered spires. Instead, the char walla's gravelly croon rouses the platoon, old Jenkins from the quartermaster's dray, his Dixie cans clanking like fettered shades as he ladles the brew, tea, stewed tar-black and scalding as sin, dosed with a sly tot of army rum if the subaltern's gaze wanders, issued daily to thaw the salient's frost from marrow deep. The circle forms round the brazier's sputter, a shallow tin of coke and sand, hooded by corrugated scrap to starve the glow that betrays to spotters' lenses, enamel mugs chipped from estaminet brawls cupped in palms raw from wire's kiss, steam coiling upward in veils that bead mustaches and blend faces into a fraternity of wind-burnt cheeks and hollow eyes. Breakfast spills meager from the night's haul, bully beef, Frey bentos tin largesse cracked open with bayonets pry, It's corn chunks pallid and slick, forked cold or hashed hasty in the Dixie if a lucky spark holds, hard biscuits iron rations or Anzac tiles, baked unyielding as shipwreck oak, jaw-aching sands the char's softening plunge, a daub of strawberry jam if the mule train dodged the mud's maw, its cloying tart a fleeting billet dew from Kent's hedgerows. Rations tally lean 2,000 calories for the deluge's toll, calibrated for the march but beggared by Passchendaele's static siege. Haig's autumn 17 churning supplies to sludge, the third Ypres push devouring 250,000 tins in a fortnight's folly, leaving Tommies to barter woodbines for a bully scrap or crunch weevils like unwelcome guests. Banter simmers low amid the mastication, Harry spins a Manchester yarn of pie shop sirens, Billy blushes at Wiltshire letters laced with cider's ghost, Jenkins grumbles of salon leaves pre-Kitchener's poster, his Walladays a sepia blur before the call. Tommy forks the beef deliberate, brines bite sharp on tongue dulled by fog, chasing it with char's bitter torrent. Assam leaves oversteep to cloak the sump's taint. Rum's ember blooming low in belly, a transient blaze gainst the salient seep. Sun crests feeble through the overcast, limning the parapet in sodden silver, shadows contracting like lifespans in the wire, while rats, salient miners, plump on carrion crumbs, raid the tin's rim, tails flicking defiant. No man's land stirs vague, a flare's wisp from yesternight, or Fritz's distant harmonica, taunting the armistice's dream. Tommy lingers in the pause, mugs steam a veil on lashes, the platoons drone a cradle gainst the war's underthrum, pulse softening from stand to snare. Feel the char's glow seep your veins, listener, its vapor a tender mist, biscuits grind a contemplative chew, drawing morning's prong into softened hush. Sipping the mug's last scald, gaze lifts wary to the parapet. Sentry's solitary perch looms, the salient's eye unblinking in the lifting mist. The char Wallace Dixie drains with a final glug, mugs drained and piled haphazard on the traverse's brink, as the platoon shrugs off breakfast's lethargy, greatcoats tugged gainst the fog's lingering chill that clings like premonition shawl. Corporal Harry materializes from his nook, a sagging bivouac where maps furled like sepulchres, his tread measured, eyes ferret keen beneath the tin hat's brim, stalking the bay for the morning's ritual inquisition, kit inspection, that parade ground pantomime amid Passchendaele's slime, where Gloss's ghost wars the mud's dominion, seems scoured for the grey ovoid eggs of body crabs, those vermin confidants hatched in wool's fevered folds. On your feet, section boots forward, lice out, he rumbles low, timbre roughened by Ypres clay, for bellows summon the sniper's caress from ruined abbey loopholes. Tommy stands to, puttees rebound hasty over hobnailed boots armored in salient sludge, the blue-gray mortar flaking to expose leather warped and weeping like flesh under gangrene's gaze. The rank assembles crooked, SMLEs presented bud high for Boar Peak, chambers swabbed with pull-through as rag greased and brassos bite, lest corrosion's creep seize the action in raid's frenzy, while Harry thumbs cuffs for the knit's pearl clutch, those trench parasites that swarm thrice daily, slain by the delousing powder's choking dust, a ceremony to fend the greyback's fever that bloats limbs to suppuration. Boots hoisted in turn, soles gouged clean of clods that could snag the charge, though the corporal's snort veils commiseration. Lord Atkins, you'd anchor a U-boat with them, where trench foot stalks every sodden wool, toes blanching to putty then rot black, the MO's lancet busy as reaper's hook if the linseed oil's rub falters. Respirators donned and puffed in drill, flannel snouts billowed like accordions to seal the breach, for Phosgene's insidious orchard scent rides the breeze unbidden, eyes to blisters, lungs to froth since Hill's 60s 15 betrayal. Post-Passchendaele's mire, where Haig's mudlarks drowned in advances aborted by the quag, inspections clamp tighter. GHQ's delusion demands turnout for spirit's mirage, though the lads swap winks, burnishing entrenching tools with spit as mud reclaims the sheen in breaths. Fears flicker tacit, Harry's cuff births a louse, pulped twixt thumbnail and forefinger with a pop like pinprick. Billy dreads the suppuration's spread, his farm calloused paws chafed raw by powder's scour. Sun climbs lackluster, steaming the parapet's bags to vaporous ghosts, The inspections close a communal sag as Harry grunts adequate, you mudlarks, tension uncoiling like a bolt's release. Tommy stows gear, the SMLEs heft kin now, a ward gainst the abyss, while the section scatters to the trench's artery, pulses steadied by Rote's narcotic grace. Let the powder's talc dust your skin, listener, seams hush a faint graze, boots thud a anchoring beat, easing morning's barb into serene yield. Duties dispatched and polish ephemeral, the salient ceaseless labors summon under the pallid sun mud's vice awaits, patient and profound. The char's bubble fades to the rhythmic slosh of sump water and shovels muted scrape against clay, distant clank of picks echoing like a buried heartbeat, rain's mist resuming in a steady, enveloping veil. Morning's gloss dissolves swift in the salient slime, listener, inspection's fleeting sheen yields to the earth's unyielding claim, chores threading the trench's sodden web. Let the scoop's glug and blades sigh lull you deeper, as Tommy bends to mud's patient summons, the corporal's grunt hangs like the fog's last tendril, the section scattering from inspection's stiff tableau into the trench's meandering veins, traverses forking like shattered ribs, bays flickering with candle nubs that sputter in drafts slithering from the rearward sap to reserves. Tommy hefts a sandbag baler, its coarse hessian drooping with seep like a fevered cloth, and trudges to the sump at the bay's nadir, a sunken vault, for feet square and fathomless in the gloom, where Ypres clay bedevils the rain to hoard its spite, transforming duckboards to perilous skiffs over a tar-black morass that nips at knees with icy teeth. The mud reigns sovereign here, no benign earth but a voracious beast, Passchendaele's water jacket, a viscous gumbo of pulverized chalk and shellfrag, spawned from the salient's watertight clay that gulps no deluge but cradles it captive, inundating bays to thigh depth after each squall, a deluge that festers boots and fells the foot to necrosis's kiss. Duckboards, slatted beach planks, warped and slime-veiled, bestride the sump like derelict bridges on a tempest's deck, groaning under burden as Tommy squats, baler plunging the ooze with a glutinous slurp, water surging up shins in frigid streams that infiltrate puttees to numb the flesh. Bailing unfolds in grim liturgy, the static war's unyielding vesper, baler brimming ebony, hurled over the parapet in sweeps that splatter no man's land's craters, fattening the moonscape's briny locks, comrades link the relay, Harry damming the freeze, Billy's farm lad sinews quaking with each hoist while hand pumps, those crank-forged iron fiends from Birmingham forges, gasp vein in the angles, valves gummed by clay that binds like vendetta. Post-Passchendaele's autumn torrent, when Haig's third Ypres churned the advance to a wade that claimed more in suction than shot, tanks mired like iron tombs, Tommy's engulfed mid-stride, the flood reaps silent, drowning funkholes or swelling limbs to bursting husks, surgeon's blades humming as autumn's harvest. Tommy's exhalation mists the air, baler's cadence harmoning the rain's tattoo on his tin hat, a metallic requiem that smothers the remote thud of Fritz's dawn grudge desultory shells, wipers specials that shriek vengeful air erupting in clay geysers of shrapnel and shale. The sump concedes grudging spans, level dipping to calf depth, yet the clay's avarice is boundless, flanks exuding fresh weeps like lesions that scorn to heal. Harry grouses of Mancunian cobbles drought. Billy frets the sump rats that navigate these abysms, scarlet orbs agleam as they paddle for lost fags. Tommy halts to wring his hose tops, linseed oil's oily luster a transient bulwark gainst the numbness's nip, toes tingling with prelude pangs of the gangrene that stole his Wiltshire uncle at Festubert. Sun filters pallid via the nimbus, sheening the sump's rim in wan luster, the trench's flanks faced with wattle baskets now unraveled to shreds, closing in like inquisitor's stall. The bailing wanes, duckboards steadying beneath foot, ephemeral triumph in mud's realm, pulses calming to the toil's hypnotic churn. Feel the water's chill drag your calves, listener, baler's slosh a lulling measure, rain's shroud a clement haze, softening morning's labor to ephemeral peace. Water subdued for the nonce, but the wire craves mend forth into no man's land's umbra, the party's murmur waxing near. The sump's obsidian sheen stills to a shallow skim, duckboards moaning solid under restored step, As Tommy discards the bailer, its weave weeping like a mourn dirge and pivots to the parapet's crest, where sandbags sag like spent hounds, their jute hides swollen with clay that trickles via rinse and ashen streams, imperiling cave-in beneath the barrage's next mallet. New consignment surfaces via the Pioneer's beast train from the back, a file of burden hampers, groaning up the sap beneath Lance Corporal's ward, Hessian sacks heaped like pyre logs, each 80 pounds of rammed loam to buttress the line gainst Fritz's Ferris hail. Tommy's shoulders a brace, frame buckling to the load that abrades like quern, the salient's gumbo appending its sly freight, rendering each tread on the fire step a gladiator's lunge, sandbags lobbed to the parapet's brow and thumps that resound faint down the traverse. Stacking initiates, a Tyler's art in miniature, sacks overlapped akin to Norman slates, pounded fast with spades heel to bond a rampart gainst shrapnel's ire, loopholes bored for rifles nuzzle slender vents where periscopes spy and SMLEs prod, shrouded in Hessian veils dyed drab to delude the spotter's lens. The perpetual men's form trench life's vertebrae, shells pock the parapet diurnal, excavating rents broad as sepulchres, sandbags rupturing like gravid pods to disgorge their innards and landslides that entomb funkholes intact, post-Passchendaele's mire, with Haig's artillery pulverizing a million rounds to October's slop, the line phrase swifter, Pioneers eves a frenzy of cram and pat, Tommy's drafted by Maddens to sustain the patch. Palms abraded by jute's rasp, rough fiber splintering beneath nails, Tommy tears the pile, comrades chaining human, Harry hurls from nether, Billy pats with rustic zeal, the section a transient guild in mud's basilica. Rain slicks the task, grips treacherous as eels, but the tempo soothes a thump, a tamp, a breathed tally, minds voyaging to Blighty's chimneys, where parapets stand fast gainst mere squalls. Corporal Harry superintends from the traverse's elbow, his snugger, Atkins, Fritz'll waltz through that, half snarl, half grateful, cognizant of frail joint invites enfilade's flail, sweeping the bay in Alloy's murmur. The parapet ascends reborn, a bastion of lowly sacks gainst the nullity, sun's feeble beams glancing off drenched jute like illusory pledge, while no man's land lures barren afar, craters steaming vague, wires hooks winking malevolent. The stack fulfilled, spines smolder with merited blaze, the trench inhaling in the labor's aftermath, a momentary citadel in flux's flux. Let the sandbag's burden ease your shoulders, listener, its thump a stabilizing pulse, clay's chill daub a tactile quiet, drawing the chore's strain into serene abatement. Walls fortified and sentinel firm, gaze sweeps the barren expanse, sentry's lonesome roost beckons, the skyline's scrutiny unflinching. The sandbag's thump quiets to a vigilant breeze sighing over drowned wire, faint rodent patters dissolving into the mist's profound hush, a periscope's subtle creak weaving through the rain's softened veil. Shore's clamor ebbs into the salient's midday trance, listener, the parapet's fortification yields to the skyline's barren gaze, sentry's isolation enfolding the hours in watchful solitude. Let the wire's sodden glint pull your eye outward, easing into the perch's patient vigil. The parapet's renewed breastwork settles with a subdued sigh, its jute weave binding fast gainst the overcast sullen gray, as Tommy claims his roost on the fire step, a buckled shelf of sodden pine atop the parapet, barely broad enough for haunches to fold and spine to lean gainst the rear parados's friable clay, SMLE cradled athwart knees like a fretful infant craving hush. The rifle's burden, 8 pounds of beech and Birmingham steel, anchors him in the stillness, sling draped slack round shoulder to loose the bolt for urgent right, while his Brody helmet dented crown from a whizbang's graze, Kent's load a veil eyes from the sun's pallid glare, now lancing clouds and lances that vapor the mud to ascending rates. Sentry duty seizes 2 hours in unbroken span, this noontide tour a solitary wolf's prowl in the section's cycle, periscope braced adjacent like a myopic's monocle, mirrors canted in a pine tube, cushioned with sacking to still the hoist, for Fritz's snipers haunt the splintered hamlets, car 98S calibrated on any Pate's rash lift. No man's land sprawls submerged ahead, 100 yards of Armageddon's doodle in the salient's scarred tome, shell holes agape like the damned's gullet, some lipped with rainwater soured by the interred ooze, others parched mires treacherous with submerged hooks, concertina wire wallows and rusting festoons, adorned with shreds of tunic and feldgrau, tatters sodden and lolling like subaqueous pennants in the gust that wafts faint putrescence on its hems. Tommy's scrutiny traces the snarl, charting rents where wiring parties stitched under Luna's averted gaze, or novel prongs winking vicious where yesternight's crew left their token, a Tommy's putty end snagged aloft, or a Fritz's pickle hob inverted in sardonic parley. The tedium reigns the veriest adversary, hours seeping to reverie where Psyche strays unbidden, to Lancashire's flagged paths, the weaver's shuttle a cadence gentler than vicar's bark, to sweetheart Sal's epistles, folded in lavender faint, vowing back by Easter though almanacs jeer the pledge. Post Passchendaele's slough, where Haig's October lunge cratered the loam afresh, exhuming relics from Hill 60's gas, sentries shoulder the salient's malediction, gazes probing for the ripple that unmasks the sap's crown. A sumprat brazen salient denizen, sleek on bully leavings, darts the wire's skirt, roseate muzzle quivering at the zephyr, undaunted by the stalemate's glower. Afar, a wagtail's chirp braves the desolation, a somber fleck gainst the drab. Tommy adjusts faint, toes wriggling gainst trench foot's torpid creep, the periscope's frigid lens misting with sigh, pulses tempo attuning to the breeze's muted keen, a threnody for the invisible. Corporal Harry stalks by once, boots squelch subdued, a breathed steady, Atkins, gaze out, not inward lingering like haze. The roost endures, a slender filament gainst the vacuum's tug, sun wheeling languid to parch the clay to fissured moans. Feel the fire steps implacable grain beneath you, listener, rifles contour a consoling bow, skylines smudge a contemplative drape, drawing midday's heft into murmured peace. Hours crawl in the roost's unhurried tide, gut murmuring faint with char's remnant, midday's dole pledges a transient grace, the section's summons wafting vague. The periscope eases mute to the step's verge, mirrors sneering a shaft of sun that thaws Tommy's knuckles fleeting, banishing the sentry's isolation with a momentary melt, as the zephyr Flanders capricious respiration, swerving from nor'wester's nip to sou'easter's humid clasp rouses the wire to subdued aria, prongs thrumming faint like lyre chords twanged by phantoms. It bears murmurs athwart the gulf, nebulous Teutonic fragments, Janas in a watchman's grumble, or the rasp of a mouth organ's plaint, die wachtem line perchance, a communal keening in the impasse's lull, nigher, shrapnel's ululation chases a spent round, shrill and orphan like a locomotive's valediction, detonating innocuous in the supports to shower clods on the rear. Tommy hunkers profounder, greatcoat gathered like anchorite's scapular, the SMLE's foresight fast on a snag that could be Fritz's helm or mere bow, digit featherlight on the guard lest spasm seize the seer in spasm. The Psyche's levy murmurs too, neurasthenia's shade in every comrade's vacant gape, sin is unraveled by the tari, the preludes boom more terror than detonation, medicos at the CCS dubbing war neurosis for essences unmoored by Ypres mill. Psyche voyages on the drafts, to hearth's hearth where demens looms by rushlight, Ma's plum duff steaming realms rent by the salient cicatrix, yet sharp in the mire's interlude, where the trench's gyre spins perpetual, dawn's right to gloaming's gaze, dole's humble boon, vigils that fray the night to tatters. Harry's relief and pens, his slouch audible down the traverse, boots sucking sump margins, a fag's ember bobbing like ignis fatuus, but the zephyr mocks the lag, lashing a stray sandbag flap to slap the parapet, pulse vaulting to sniper's snap that stays unborn. Post Passchendaele's wraithly reaping, where gloaming forays garnered lore in gore's exchange, captives hauled writhing for patois enigmas or lines metal murmurs wax oracular, hearsay of whippets, armored crawlers to ford the craters, or vapor novel and mute, Diphosgene's pararoma luring alveoli to submerge. Tommy strokes his respirator's straps, flannel fusty with neglect, a phylactery gainst the verdant scourge that asphyxiated 15th's inaugural surge. A very whispers aloft Fritz's pistol, Crimson orb unfurling ephemeral to tint no man's land in carmine phantom, contours etching keen and mercifully hazed as tenebrosity repossesses its tithe, sizzle waning to Zephyr's dirge. Billy's timbre drifts nebulous from the bay, a crooned pack up your troubles, esprit's threadbare mantle, blending the gust's refrain. Sun wanes toward noon, umbras pooling in traverses like effused sepia, the roost's close as skyline's covenant, rifles tube chilling in the breeze's fondle. Tommy exhales deliberate, the zephyr's susurrus salve gainst the roost's alloy-strung filament, section rousing to midday's summons. Let the murmurs thread your tresses, listener, zephyr's breath a tender emission, flares wraith a transient vision, softening the sentry's scrutiny to placid meander. Relief dawns with the section's subdued drone, but the wiring band's umbra lengthens, patrol's hour nears, night's mantle tarrying to seize the suture. Ambient sounds build a subtle undercurrent, the breeze's murmur hushes to a taut stillness, faint cutters clip resounding like shears in the crepuscule, distant flares popping muffled like green will-o'-the-wisps, boots squelching faint in the creep toward the parapet. Midday's isolation ebbs into the salient's gloaming trance, listener, the skyline's barren scrutiny turns inward to the wire's sodden snare, patrol's umbra elongating as dusk murmurs its pall. Let the cutter's muted bite lure you onward, softening into night's concealed toil, asterisk. Relief's pat on flank, Harry's subdued wires yours, Tom, dusk's draws Tommy from the fire step's roost, the periscope's lens misted with midday's vapor eased down like a drape's close, as the trench rouses to the gloaming's ashen hush, the section's cycle allotting the dark like scant rations, each soul a mote in the salient's nebula of shade. Corporal Harry convenes the wiring band in the traverse's bend, 8 umbras from the platoon, Tommy, Billy with cutters gripped like scapulars, 3 Cheshires lugging spools of novel prongs, and Jenkins the Walla on hindwatch with a cha-cha-its unwieldy sprawl, its curved mags tinkling faint. Sergeant Ellis briefs and susurrations, chart unrolled on a sandbag like a soothsayer's palm, breach at 60 yards, clip the aged, string the fresh, no murmur, flare and fossilize. The parapet's brink towers, sandbags hunched to aid the vault, Tommy's pulse a muffled drum beneath the khaki, for no man's land's clasp is no tender paramour but a reaver, harvesting more entangles thrall than open onslaught. Dusk's mantle veils the vault, sun's final smear hemorrhaging to violet as Tommy surmounts the bags, greatcoat snagging ephemeral on prongs that graze like nettles, frame pitching prone into the crawl, a ventral drag through mud's frigid pottage, elbows furrowing ruts, knees a braiding shale that gnaws like shingle fangs. The cutters sway from Billy's nape, Sheffield iron sheathed in dope canvas, their maws cast for concertina's corroded whirls, leagues of it garlanding the zone, a Ferris maze to flay the forayer's lunge or ensnare the heedless in hemorrhagic knots. Perils lurk in each obscurity, flares abrupt effulgence from Fritz's vigils, transmuting crawlers to clay foul for machine pistols staccato, tripwires humming occult, charges interred shallow as spites, triggered by tread's errant caress, or bands colliding in the sable, blades crossing in mute paroxysm that concludes in gullet's gargle. Post-Passchendaele's wire inferno, or October's thunder-minced snarls to impenetrable breaks, bands like this suture nocturnal, Hague's wastage exacting the line's unremitting wheel, though the loam reclaims prongs and days, rust and spate colluding with the cadaver's press. Tommy's respiration mists the mire, inches from Billy's heels, the band's viper uncoiling languid, spools of new wire etching trails that might doom by Mattin's gleam. The breach unveils a jagged rift in the concertina, senescent strands splayed like fractured members from yestereve's spite, prongs hooked on osseous shards that intimate the unentombed. Cutters snap cadenced, iron kissing iron in nips that reverberate overloud in the quietude, sparks dim as glow flies, while Cheshires unroll the fresh cord, prongs winking baleful in the Very's aftersheen. A flare sighs aloft, emerald nova blooming transient to limn the waste and lurid noon band petrifies mid-inhalation, forms prone as the prostrate, pulses hammering tacit till the sable reclaims them, sizzle waning to Zephyr's threnody. Sergeant rasps firm, gaze abroad, his Webley a somber nova at flank. The crawl's frigidity permeates profound, mud-caking visage to mask, Tommy's psyche flickering to cell's carte de visite stowed in billet book, her simper a periapt gainst the vacuum. Let the wires chill graze your palms, listener, cutters snap a contemplative clip, flares quietude a breathless interregnum, softening the band's brink to shadowed serenity. Wire buttressed in the night's sedulous weave, pulses throbbing even rearward to the trench's crease, but shells yearn for the vesper's end, their remote snarl rousing. The flare's viridian spectre wanes to pitch, etching retinal phantoms like unabsolved trespasses, as the band inhales concerted and resumes the suture. Billy's cutters recommencing their tacit concerto, maws lopping rusted filaments with a twang stifled by cloth-bound hafts, each sundered prong a minor purgation of the breech's frailty. Tommy furrows the fallen wire, gauntlets fraying to digits raw and sanguine-streaked, the alloy's crooks excavating like indictments, while Cheshires lace the new cord through stanchions, crude piles of hazel hammered mute with mallet's muffled thwack, prongs spaced pitiless to rake the assaulter's hide or foul the scout's cuff. The concertina resurrects, a ferrous adder reborn in the desolation, its whirls intermeshing like orisons for the madden's foray's safe recall, for forays slink these byways under Luna's rise, Fritz's hand-streechers rummaging for laxity with truncheon's malice or entrenching tool's edge. Dread's clasp is silken here, not adamant a muted vice in viscera, respiration calibrated to the zephyr's caprice, for clamor heralds the scythe, a fumbled cutter's chime, a tread squelch overbold, evoking the MG08/15's bras cell reaping from athwart the nullity. Nocturnal rites like this seem the front's ragged hem, wiring bands, the infantry's unsung engineers, nocturnal ventures since Langmark's 14 recoil, restoring what ordnance undoes, though Passchendaele's gale transmuted snarls to unfordable brambles, ensnaring Tommies in no man's purgatory till whippets fantasized their inch. Post-October's lunacy, with Haig's batteries mute but for grudge, bands wax audacious yet brittle, supplies gaunt, prawns needed to necessities, the salient's gumbo devouring piles like ravenous barrows. Comrades' respirations missed proximate, a mutual emission in the recumbent throng, Harry's breathed like lassen a noose with a bayonet eliciting choked snickers, Esprit's ragged quip gainst the apprehension. Tommy wrenches the cord taut, prawns nipping gauntlet to elicit a droplet of blood that beads somber, Psyche adrift to Lancashire's thickets, hawthorn flowering in May, not this Ferris Lent, while a sumprat, sleek warden of the desolation, scuttles adjacent, muzzle quivering at the iron's zest. Sergeant encircles prone, umbra fusing with crater's flange, his snugger Fritzl tango through that a spur cloaked in gruff solicitude, where a lax whirl invites the foray's crimson tally, captives hauled to Hohenzollern's vaults or dire. The suture nears consummation, whirls fused flawless, the breach effaced to steel's phantasm, band's viper inverting languid, drag traces planed with boots caressed to baffle the dawn's scrutiny. Luna gleams no man's land faint, craters pooling umbra like spilled quicksilver, the trench's parapet a remote bulwark summoning hearth. Pulses abate in the retreat's slink, the night's drudgery a tenuous aegis gainst Moro's caprice, frames aching with mud's lent mass. Let the prongs grudging seed beneath your grasp, listener, whirls twist a lulling helix, night's quietude encompassing mantle, softening the suture's strain to placid abatement. Right fulfilled in the umbra's sedulous craft, the barrage swells from afar, vesper's wrath quickens, shells thunder nearing. Ambient sounds swell a subtle menace, the cutter's clip dissolves into the ascending ululation of inbound shells, loam-quaking crumps muffled like a tempest's viscera, clods pattering like erratic hail in the salient sodden hush. Vesper's fragile truce fractures now, listener, the wire's suture retreats to reverie as the firmament's ferrous reaping seizes the breeze, shells chorus braiding apprehension's muted swell. Let the whistle's plaint pierce tender, softening into the gale's encompassing rumble, The band's slink inverts in a serpentine quietude, spools etching final ruts planed by boots murmur, As Tommy vaults the parapet rearward to the trench's crease, sandbags parting with a subdued thump, frame crumpling into the traverse's angled refuge, mire besmirched and winded, the knight's labor incised in prawns novel grazes that smart like remonstrances beneath gauntlets chafe. The bay rouses to vespers drowse, comrades lulled on duckboards with woodbine's indolent spirals, Harry's faro deck slapping faint in a round of vingty tion, Billy nursing a beaker of char turned tepid, when the premier whistle keens a shrill, plummeting wail akin to a harpy's threnody, cleaving the zephyr from the Teutonic battery's remote choirs, Skoda's 15 centimeters howitzers vomiting their rancor athwart the salient's bow. Flat. Corporal Harry's snap rends the respite, a lash of mandate, as the section dives for the traverse's flanks, those meandering screens of loam and jute, foiled to the fragments reaping arc frames heaping in mounds, Brody helmets clanging like atonal vespers, pulses battering sternum in atavistic cadence. The round vaults unseen, a calculus spectre charted by cannoneers leagues astern, fuse calibrated to air-rend over the line, and detonates in a fount of soil and splinter, crump resounding like deity's mallet on forge, the concussion undulating the zephyr to thrust respiration from lungs, clods cascading in showers that pelt the parapet like sleet from abyss. Tommy clasps the flanks curve, greatcoat hauled o'er crown, the SMLE gripped periap trigid, while the traverse parries the lateral's caress, those shards ululate wicked, rebounding off jute and glimmers that sear the penumbra. Ordnance lords the conflict's arithmetic, 90% of the toll from its gullet, not Ape's balladry but fragments dispassionate flurry, high explosive globes from 60-pounders and riposte battery, vapor globes drifting indolent on Zephyr's whim, or the creeping wall that shepherded the Soam's wraith legions onward to Tangle. Post-Passchendaele's autumnal gale, when Haig's batteries masticated a million globes to October's slush, Vesper spites like this wax customary, Fritz's reprisal for Madden's potshots, haphazard as spate but mortal in some, felling a Tommy hither, a funkhole yonder. The gale mounts, whistles proliferating to a shrieking choir, bursts parading the line like a sot's stagger, one pocks the bay's flank, loam erupting in sable gusher that entombs duckboards under shale, another air-rends aloft, ball-bearings sleeting the parapet in alloy's baleful rice, a comrade's oath flowering keen as the prick claims his jowl. Clods drizzle peppers the traverse, mud's moist thwack on Brody a grotesque percussion, while the zephyr congeals with Lyddite's torched honey reek, orbs watering in the mordant haze. Harry's growl telegrams from Berlin, the swine, his quip a tenuous float on dread's current, Billy's mules lost to the clamor, section huddled in communal brute squeeze, respirations attuning to the round's capricious throb. The tempest crests succinct, a score of spites volley, then wanes to desultory ululations, the salient inhaling in the abrupt quietude, oracles tolling with spectral whistles that ape the truce. Tommy uncoils gradual, loam-dusting cilia, the flanks clasp freeing like a reluctant suitor, endurance's exhalation a bomb against the gale's larceny. Feel the concussion's remote throb in your breast, listener, shards ululation a waning plaint, clods descend a tender spatter, softening the gale's ire to resonant peace. Gale wanes at length, oracles carol on like tolled anvils, stand to it gloaming assembles the line, rifles ascending to greet the crepuscule's summons. The ultimate round's reverberation rolls laggard into muteness, a subsiding snarl engulfed by the salient sodden quietude, bequeathing the trench a pockmarked desolation, parapet gashed like a colossus's talon mark, duckboards splintered to flotsam, jute sacks sundered to disgorge their lone viscera in cascades that choke the sump afresh. Tommy rears on elbows abraded raw, the traverse's flank friable beneath palm like crumbling scone, and scans the bay's disarray, comrades rousing in the penumbra, Harry expectorating grit with a right spared me stew, the rotters, while Billy claws mire from orbs, his lad visage streaked to battle mask. The section fans prudent, SMLEs at port to fend the pock's flange, where the closing burst gaped a novel lesion, 12 feet broad and profund, steaming like a vat's respiration in the vesper's frigidity, rims slagged and sleek, exhaling the lithic zest of profaned loam mingled with Lyddite's acerbity. Scrutiny initiates in breaths, the Sheld's liturgy. Chime in, lads, members and lamps, Corporal Harry's roster slicing the toll, as palms probe the penumbra for interred kindred, spades rasping tentative where the detonation's sepulchre to Funkhole's verge, exhuming a shrouded haversack with tins indented but intact, a comrade's limbs surfacing wan and quivering from the slip. Pock's inquest discloses the strife's stoic calculus, fragments dispersal claiming no gore this span, though the salient scroll tallies legions thus rounds the grand equalizer, toppling subaltern and Tommy alike in Ferris' impartial sleet, post-Passchendaele's spectral gleaning where October 1st reaped 70,000 an instance, Pock's engulfing cohorts intact in the lunge's churn. Tommy circumscribes the flange, boot toe essaying the sag, peering into the abyss where fibrils dangle like noosed shades, the vapor ascending in spirals that cloak the nadir, a wraith breath from the clay's lacerated core. Psyche's liberation creeps with endurance's exhalation, the gale's depredation undone, no comrade vaporized to carmine nebula, no appendage consigned to the sawbone's edge, though the toll and oracles lingers, a tinnitus paean that hazes the zephyr's return, Psyche replaying the ululations in ceaseless gyre, or Neurosis's sly barb tugging at unraveled strands. Harry claps his dorsum, Charles knit it, Atkins, potent as Midas curses, whip weaving Esprit's suture, while Billy reclaims a strayed helmet, its dome starred by fragments graze, a relic of the spared. The section reconstructs tender, spades seal the Pock's gullet with clods and detritus, pounded to staunch the wheel, duckboards spanned anew with foraged slat, the bay inhaling in toil's muted cadence. Sun slants toward meridian, sheening the Pock's rim and sanguine brass, umbras elongating to claw the wire, the salient's quietude reclaiming its scepter with lark's audacious trill. Tommy reslings the SMLE, its stock warmed by the fray's wraith flame, pulse moderating to the section's drone, endurance's afterlight a transient elixir. Let the Pock's vapor spiral round your visage, listener, loam's throb a remote reminiscence, cloud's civil lulling sus, softening the tempest's reverberation to placid fade. Gloaming descends clement on the sutured line, rifles ascend once more in the crepuscule's quietude, evening's roost echoes dawn's apprehension, bayonets shimmering to hail the dusk. Asterisk, ambient sounds transition, the shell's crump softens to the muted snap of bayonets clipped in the crepuscule, zephyrs keen reverting with gloaming's profound frigidity, a faint, cadenced tramp of boots along the fire step blending the rain's softened veil. The firmament's ire ebbs into the salient's vesper hush, listener, the Pock's suture recedes to echo as crepuscule's roost rouses the line afresh, rifles ascending like acolytes to the waning gleam. Let the bayonet's shimmer snare the last ray, softening into evening's vigilant clasp, asterisk. The Pock's novel fill compacts beneath padded clods, a makeshift cicatrix in the bay's lacerated mane, as the sun's trajectory dips toward the skyline's livid frontier, daubing the salient in daubs of russet and cinder that gild the wires prongs to ephemeral aureate. Corporal Harry's whistle, 2 curt puffs, the stanta's invocation ripples the trench like a shingle and sump, hauling the section from shelling's torpor, frames unfolding from traverses with the groan of overstrained pivots, Brody helmets realigned low against the Vesper's augury of Foray's scarlet fangs. The second stanza seizes 1,730 hours precise, crepuscule's treacherous double to dawn's bane, when umbras elongate to shroud the slink and fog condenses with the diurnal's exhaled moist, transfiguring no man's land to a plush abyss where Fritz's jaggers prowl audacious, hand-streechers gliding from saps with trenching spades wedded to stilettos, the mystic confederate in the near-quarters slaughter. Tommy remounts the fire step afresh, the timber yet tepid from midday's roost, bayonet affixed with a snick that tolls crisp in the quietude, its triangular edge capturing the perishing ray like a troth graven in Ferris, 19 inches of Sheffield spite athirst for the infrequent clash, though most eaves conclude in glares athwart the sludge's unyielding pale. The lineman's ragged, 18 khaki wraiths arrayed along this protuberance of the salient suppurating bow, SMLEs shouldered in contour against the parapet's bulwark, periscopes ascending like wary adders to incise the crepuscule sands the pate's lethal diadem. Foray dreads intensify herein, post-Passchendaele's lore incised in the uninhumed, October's gloaming lunges foundered in wires morass, but crepuscule's murk favors the daring, Fritz's Sturmtruppen with cudgels beaded nail and vapor masks proboscis, towing Tommy's writhing for regiments vaults or dire. Tommy squints via the fog's amassing plates, the zone's pox pooling jet sable, trunks looming idyllic where groves erstwhile bent to zephyr, a remote bellow of Fritz's Minenwerfer deriding the truce. Psyche hardens to the tarry, the bayonet's hilt chill beneath palm, while Harry growls craven a tussle, Atkins? Kinder than Pharaoh, his jape a buckler gainst the free zone that intrudes with light's larceny. Corporal stalks the step, Webley holstered like a sable eidolon at girdle, his bayonets keen, lads, no dally for Jerry's cradle song, half snarl, half wince, cognizant the drill's monotony veils the levy, sinews jangled from Vesper's grudge, orbs straining for stir's verity or ruse. Crepuscule deepens, hues hemorrhaging to monochrome, the salient's quietude amplifying the trivial, a sumprat's plunge, the seep from a jute seems rent, zephyr hauling nebulous Vaderland from athwart the void, a mutual litany in the impasse's orison. The stand to cling sinewy, an hour's roost in crepuscule's gullet, rifles poise a contemplative right, pulses flutter waning to the line's concerted respiration. Feel the bayonets shimmer dim on your digits, listener, steps inexorable prop a firm roost, crepuscule's quietude a plush lure, softening the roost's alloy to placid sentry. All clear exhales at length, rifles descending with the raised capitulation, dinner's reeky pledge wafts from Dixies, the section's drone summoning tender. The all-clear's susurration weaves the line like pilfered bomb, bayonets unshipped with ferrous sighs, the fire step ceding its claim as the section descends the traverse in a trudge of slackened sinews, crepuscule's cowl now plenary, umbras pooling in bays like effused jet, the salient's lone flanks fusing to vague penumbra where candle nubs wink tentative from funkholes. Tommy folds into the dugout's squad vault, SNLE braced adjacent like a warden's kin, the greatcoat sloughed to shake clods that patter like hesitant spate, unveiling shirt cuffs rolled gainst the Vesper's clammy vice, greyback's faint itch a subdued prickle neath the warp. Perishing ray enacts impostor's gambit, every stir in the wire a Teutonic wraith, prongs faint moan the foray's advent, or zephyrs gambol via jute gaps conjuring the flare's wraithbloom that tarries Psyche's orb sketching Sturmtruppen in field grey phantoms, truncheons upraised in the sable, though the night's veridical haunt is the tarry, essences etched by the occult, each flare's burst a limelight's peril, each rustle the sap's pate breaching prong, grenades parabola a comet's train in. The jet umbars condense to baffle, the parapets contour haze to a rampart of fable, no man's land a palimpsest for Edola, pox fancied as saps burrowing nigh, trunks as helms peering sly, the zephyr's sough-aping treads creep or pins pluck, transmuting the watchful to leap at melodies jape. Post-Passchendaele's idyllic gleaning, where crepuscule forays garnered lore in gore's swap, captives hauled spasming for idiom's arcana or line's sinew, ruses hone the brink, Tommy's bartering yarns of Jerry's lantern ruses, flares time to ensnare the sucker's lurch, though most eves close and glares, the impasse's pitiless jest. Harry kindles a lucifer, Woodbine's nimbus blooming succinct to limn his mustache's curl, spotted I'm own self Fritz with tusks, waltzing in the prong, his fable award gainst the sable's nibble, Billy nodding orb-wide, his weaver's nerves raw as the crepuscule's illusions. Corporal Harry lingers at the step's flange, conterfusing with tenebrosity, his lamps low, lads spare the spectacle for Madden's a deference to the blackout's fairest decree, candles call to fishers lest Fritz's observers summon the batteries. Tommy rubs temples, the diurnal scroll stand to duad, shells ire, wires graze settling like mire in arteries, the trench's cadence a dirge that lulls yet alerts, every umbra a potential barrow. Luna's rise intimates faint via the nimbus, argenting the parapet's verge, the salient's refrain swelling subdued, howls query defying the ordnance, a mouth organ's wheeze from supports, the remote thud of night grudge's overture. The ruses abate in this section's throng, drones weaving a mesh gainst the vacuum, pulses attuning to the night's unhurried throb. Let the umbra's gambit tease your contours, listener, stirs quietude a tender murmur, raise wane a clement drape, softening the roost's ruses to pacific unravel. Night deepens its levy on the line, dole shared in the penumbra, epistles from afar illumine the sable, their creased lore a beacon subdued. Ambient sounds warm the crepuscule's snap yields to the clatter of mess tins and chars revived bubble over braziers, faint parchment crinkles joining the night's profound hush, a mouth organ's wheeze trailing the frigidity. Crepuscule's ruses dissolve into umbra, listener, the line's roost softens to vesper's hearth nimbus, dole's vapor ascending like unheeded orisons, epistles creases a tenuous span to realms beyond the prong. Let the tin's rasp and leafs turn cradle unire, as the trench appropriates its scant banquet, crepuscules all clear wanes to the trench's primal throb, the fire steps Edola dispersing into bays where funkholes cower like deluged rodents, their canvas awnings weeping rills that meander the duckboards. Corporal Harry signals the evocation, noshing up, Ulat Airfritz scents the slop, his timbre a shingle anchor in the penumbra, while the charwalla Jenkins rekindles the brazier afresh, a shallow tin of cinder and ash flickering defiant against the night's clammy blockade, flames vaulting succinct to etch visages in sanguine aureoles, umbras capering elongated athwart jute flanks like carousers at a wake. Mess tins rattle forth from haversacks enamel survivals gouged by bayonets probe and rounds grudge clustered round the nimbus where the Dixie seethes, ragou's bubble a subdued paean that drowns the zephyr's moan, vapor cloaking mustaches in clement haze. Supper spills from the diurnal stray, bully beef, Fray Bento's tin munificence sundered with opener's wheeze, its corn slabs sallow and oleaginous, forked chill or minced precipitant in the Dixie if a fortuitous spark endures, McConaughey's ragout of serendipity smiles, a canned quag of rutabaga lumps and enigma flesh in gravy viscous as sumpmuck, simmered languid to veil the tin's fairest zest. Rum allotment ensues, the dram decanted from a flagstone flagon beneath the lieutenant's averted orb, 3 drams of naval yield, somber as remorse and igneous as redemption, quaffed pure to blunt the freezes fong in the diurnal's roster of bane. The sections ring contracts, spoons plunging cadenced into tins, the braziers crackle attuning to the mastication, beef's saline efflorescence on tongue blunted by haze, hardtack's tenacious crunch ceding to ragou's clasp, a calorific armistice gainst the salient's pilfer 2,000 essences fodder, meted austere since Passchendaele's voracious October, when victual conduits clogged on mud's gullet, forsaking Tommies to gnaw fringes on iron tiles or haggle fags for a spectral ovum. Banter burgeons subdued amid the sup, Harry recounts a Mancunian tart's leer, nary this yank awful, his tine stabbing histrionic, Billy savors demure, Weaver's abyss insatiable, while Jenkins grumbles of Indochina's stews, aromatics forfeited to the empire's levy. Tommy's spoons measured, the ragou's tepidity flooding abdomen like paramour's sigh, rum's cinder blooming basil and viscera, a momentary blaze gainst the salient seepage. Post-Passchendaele's dearth, where Haig's thrust devoured a million tins in a fortnight's frenzy, eves like this knit the unravel esprit's tallow to the strife's arid attrition, though the tins escutcheons flake like fictions, vowing prime viands from Chicago's chimeras. Luna Argent's no man's land faint beyond the parapet, pox winking like orbs in the sable, while the brazier's coals perish to sanguine ember, the sections drone a cradle gainst the night's growl. Tins rasp barren, rum's after scald a tacit blaze, pulses abating in the banquet's transient clasp. Feel the ragou's vapor on your countenance, listener, spoons plunge a lulling measure, braziers sputter a hearth's remote kin, softening vesper's barb to sated quietude. Abdomens replete with the night's modest boon, parcels surface from the rear's beast dray, male's delicate filaments, epistles seals and violet. The Dixie's bubble stills to a sigh, tins stacked precarious by the brazier's perishing nimbus, as the post lances trudge heralds the vesper's veridical bounty, mail call, the tenuous lifelines slung from Blighty's post in jute hampers hauled up the sap, evading Fritz's night grudge with beast's steadfast hoof and private's plea. Post, tolls subdued down the line, a clarion milder than bugles brass, the section surging like juveniles at Yuletide, palms extended for the roster's reckoning, appellations rasped in alphabetical breath, Atkins, T.1 from the missus, the lance's timbrous span round vowels warped by Cheshire mist. Tommy reclaims his sheaf, envelope creased from the channel's traverse, ink blurred but Sal's penmanship burgeoning bold, my own Tom. The loom's cadence mourns sands the aroma of lavender tenuous as vow, enfolded with a pressed cowslip from the garden's recalcitrant flourish. The ring reforms round the brazier, candles call to fishers lest Fritz's observers summon the batteries, tallow nubs guttering in horn saucers, their luminescence pooling aureate on leaves that unfold like confidences in confessional sable. Perusal commences in drones, epistles a tessera of hearth's hearth, Ma's scribble of victual lines and blackout rites, Da's phlegmatic mills at half heed the prawn, son, Sal's affectionate braid of Hamlet revels and spectral quadrilles, censored lacunae where trench transmutes to vanguard, despond veiled and beaming for thee to spare the blue-lead censor. The Psyche's levy breathes tacit, joy's scintilla in a verse of ardor, sorrow's barb and tidings of a comrade's folk felled to influenza's shade, the schism's pang blighty's hour marching sundial languid while the salience dials tick and rounds tally, epistles datelined fortnights prior, arriving like resonances from a life semi-somnolent. Post-Passchendaele's cascade of the slain, male burgeons with relics supplications and juveniles scrawls, Esprit's keel gains the prawn's attrition, though the section circulates round, Harry declaims a paramour's tease, eliciting guffaws raw as the dram, Billy cherishes a fillet, jowls flushing in the nimbus, his weaver lass's oaths a buckler gainst the sable. Tommy traces Sal's curlicues, cowslips petal friable to powder twixt digits, Psyche adrift to flagged alleys where gas mantles burgeon and wires carol of armistice's hearsay, the epistle's mass a periapt gainst the night's unsolicited phantoms, neurasthenia's murmur in the leaf's plate, or Forey's wraith in the zephyr's sough. Corporal Harry reclaims his solitary missive, mustache twitching at spouse's lines, a rare fissure in the corporal's cuirass. Luna ascends paramount, argenting the parapet's brink, the salient's hush magnifying the leaf's crinkle like pilfered secrets, remote thud of Fritz's night grudge a prelude snarl to the ring's quietude. Epistles refold gradual, seals stowed secure in billet books hide, the sections bond-plated tighter in mutual yearning, pulses buoyed succinct on reminiscence's current. Let the ink's tenuous zest tarry on your respiration, listener, leaves pivot a tender unfurl, candles sputter a subdued pharos, softening mail's pang to breathe solace. Lore folded gainst the night's frigidity, night's roosts levy the spans, sentries tour rousing the line. Asterisk, ambient sounds deepen the sable, epistles crinkles hush to the subdued tramp of sentry boots along duckboards, very flares popping remote like emerald will-o'-the-wisps, a mouth organ's wheeze trailing into midnight's profound quietude, Zephyr's sigh-bearing faint, uneasy drones from the line. Mail's solace creases away now, listener, Vesper's nimbus dims to the night's inexorable roost, sentries tour rousing the trench to fractured ward, spans levied by the sable's patient levy. Let the boot's muted thud resonate in your tread, softening into midnight's vigilant drone, asterisk. Epistles stowed secure gainst the night's encroaching frigidity, Sal's cowslip friable to reminiscence's powder and billet book's plate. Tommy rears from the funcoal's squat huddle, the dugout's zephyr stale with expended char and unlaundered warp, to assert his midnight tour. Two spans solitary roost on the fire step, the sections gyre meeting the sable like niggard dole, each soul an isle in the salient's nebula of umbra. Corporal Harry taps his flank in transit, midnight to 2, Atkins, gaze broad, audition keener, his timbre shingle subdued to cleave the quietude sands rousing Fritz's eavesdroppers, while the line rouses in fractured relay, Harry slumps to his funcoal with a yawn veiled as growl, Billy coils fetal beneath greatcoat's pinion, the trench exhaling in the roost's handover, tallow nubs snuffed to fissures that wink like plotters in the base penumbra. Tommy ascends the step languid, duckboards moaning beneath hobnails eroded to nubs, the parapet's jute flanks chill and pliant beneath palm like a beast's hide at repose, SNLE shouldered slack for the night's protracted lean, periscope braced primed to hoist sans the pate's lethal coronet. Midnight's dais is isolation's pitiless jape, no man's land a jet palimpsest pricked by wires tenuous sheen beneath luna's laggard ascent, pox voids that engorge sound and sight, the zephyrs sough the soul current, hauling some prat's patter or remote owl's query as portents of the vacuum. Very lights burst sporadic from Fritz's vigils of Viridian or Aureate nova blooming succinct, bathing the zone in noon's pitiless parody, umbras honing to stilettos that carve the prawns whirls into stark relief, every trunk a helm, every scrub a bayonet's glint band petrifies mid-respiration till the sizzle wanes, tenebrosity rushing rearward like a pilferer's absolution. Foray preps linger in the wings, phosphor globes heaped by the step, their crystal phials charged with phosphorus alabaster spite to blind the slinkers, Mills pineapples ponderous in the pouch, pineapple fluting primed for the lob, though most roosts close and glares, the impasses bercers of zephyr and prong. Post-Passchendaele's nocturnal gleaning, or October's crepuscule bled to Madden's forays, Fritz's Sturmtruppen slitting gullets for patois or lines, midnight tours bear the brunt, sinews strung like harpsichord alloy, the solitary warden a fulgurate for the sable's whims. Tommy squints via the periscope's pane, haze tenuous with respiration, charting the rift sutured spans past, bronza argent mesh gainst the phantom lunge, psyche adrift to Lancashire's clock tower tolls, midnight's levy there a curfew's sigh, not this perpetual now. A very sighs aloft once more, Viridian wraith illuminating the desolation in verdant quietude, the warden's contour etched bold then mercifully hazed as night repossesses its due, pulses stutter abating to the zephyr's return. The trench slumbers fitful below, snores rasping erratic as the zephyr's ultimate sough, a comrade's hack rippling the line like augury's resonance. The roost clings patient, rifles contour a contemplative clasp, the salient's midnight a vast, respiring leviathan. Feel the periscope's frigidity on your cheek, listener, flares nova a transient drape, boots tramp a stabilizing throb, softening the warden's quietude to placid ward. Roost closes with the night's unhurried gyre, funkhole summons, but relief drones of repose, though hearsay rouses the line. The flare's aftersheen wanes to jet, midnight's palimpsest redrawn in umbra's grasp, as Tommy's tour nears its two-span compass, the fire steps roost seeding to the trench's undercurrent drone murmurs threading the bays like pilfered haze, comrades rousing in funkholes to relay the hearsay, Madden's foray bruin, lads, Fritz Nazen for a brawl. Corporal Harry materializes from the traverse's penumbra, his bulk a denser shade in the cowled tallows waver, briefing in rasps that coil gainst the zephyr, signals crackle Jerry's musterant saps, captives for the Kaiser's tea, phosphors primed, mills to fist, no bravura. The section rouses laggard, greatcoats tugged gainst the profounding frigidity, SNLEs fetched from props with bolts cycled mute, the line prickling like pelt gainst gale's advent, for nocturnal rites are the strife's slice subbelly, trench forays since Messina's 17, blade dances in the sable for lore's barter, patois gleaned for dialects arcana, lines probed for frail seams, though Passchendaele's pronghell transmuted most to sanguinary baths, forayers snared in prong's clasp, bayonets. Crossing in paroxysm that reaps more wardens than Sturmtruppen. Hearsay swells in the quietude, low japes veiling the vice and gut, Harry's craven a Fritz for brekkie? Tastes like sour slop, drawing chokes that crackle like coals, Billy's orb-wide fixation on the prong, his weaver's visions of hearth curdled to Forey's crimson reel, while Jenkins fingers his cookery's arc, Indochina's phantoms in the edges gleam. Dread dawn's silken gauntlets herein, not the gale's roar but the tarry's languid gnaw, essences incised by the occult, each flare's burst a limelight's peril, each stir the sap's pate breaching prong, Grenad's parabola a comet's train in the jet. Post-October's frenzy, where Haig's crepuscule thrusts fed Fritz's counter-forays Stostruppen with bludgeons studded nail and vapor mask snout, towing Tommy's spasming to regimental vaults. 4 interrogations craft murmurs wax prophetic, signals sizzle hinting massed umbras beyond the concertina, the salients bow a hopper for the probe. Tommy reslings the SMLE, bayonets hilt to chill periapt, psyche replaying Hill 60s lore from veterans, forays degenerated to melee's mania, comrades lost to the Matins grudge that hails the dawn. Phosphor files chill and palm, their shatter vowing alabaster fires blind, mills heft a covenant of fragments caress, the section a coiled helix in the bays, respirations calibrated to the zephyr's caprice. Luna veils behind nimbus, the zone a pit of unplumbed jet, remote crump of Fritz's night grudge overtures snarl, the murmurs coiling denser gainst the sable's loom. Corporal nods the line's preparedness, his firm let M slink, will croon M keep the home fires, japes brink honed keen, esprit's frayed filament gainst the incoming's barb. The drones cling, a tenuous aegis in midnight's gullet, pulses attuning to the night's uneasy throb. Let the murmurs graze your audition, listener, hearsay's helix a tender spiral, foray's umbra a clement press, softening the night's brink to vigilant peace. Matins nears with the gyre's pivot, reposes tenuous boon in the funk hole, though the line rouses to its renewal. Word count, 599. Ambient sounds crest to pre-Matins hush, the murmur's helix unwinds to the soft rustle of greatcoats settling in funk holes, night's drones fading into the expectant quietude of approaching gleam, a remote rooster's crow muffled through haze, rain's patter resuming like a lapsed berserk's. Midnight's ward dissolves now, listener, the foray's umber retreats unclaimed, gyre pivoting to repose's tenuous boon in the dugout's clasp, Matins haze amassing tender as a pall. Let the Russell's quietude cradle you profounder, as the trench yields to rest's clement levy, asterisk reliefs tap on flank Billy's tentative off-ye-go, Tom Matins peepin' draws Tommy from the fire step's roost, the periscope's pane hazed with night's dew eased down like a drape's close, as the trench rouses to the pre-Matins ashen quietude, the ultimate all-clear rippling subdued through bays like an unvoiced benison. The gyre's third night wanes, for spans levy incised in Myers mask and osseous throb, the salient's attrition a roster of stantios duad diurnal, shells ire, prongs graze, roosts that pilfer repose in shards too minuscule to knit, yet endurance's tacit fortune breathes via the haze, no foray's crimson gleaning this gyre, no comrade hauled spasming to Fritz's vaults, the line and scathe as Matins' premier blush limbs the parapet in water damask. Tommy descends the traverse languid, duckboards slick with night's condensate, SMLE slung slack athwart dorsum like a fatigued palmer's staff, the funk hole welcoming with its squat vault and chaff-strewn base, comrades' contours tangled in greatcoats' layers, snores rasping irregular as the zephyr's ultimate sough. Corporal Harry lingers at the step's flange, his contour fusing with the penumbra, a final well-warded, lads, repose while ye may, shingle laced with the rare unction of acclaim, cognizant reliefs beast stray nears from succor lines, novel visages to assert the front's coronet by morn. The dugout's penumbra envelopes, tallow's nub guttering to coal, its luminescence perishing on flanks faced with frayed wattle that bows like bowed brows, the zephyr dense with warps moist and unlaundered fraternity, some strip a metronome to the settling. Tommy sloughs sodden puttees, toes prickling with trench foot's torpid recession, linseed oil daubed precipitant from the tin's ultimate dregs, a greasy aegis gainst the rot that claims limbs in the wet's blockade. Post-Passchendaele's idyllic levy, where October's mire drowned lunges and drowned kindred alike, pox brimmed with the uninhumed, gyres blurred to perpetual now, this all-clear feels a minor thaumaturgy, the section's roster equilibrated in gore's deferral, though the salient's bow reaps its due elsewhere, remote crumps from polygon would a night's berserkers of elsewhere's woe. Harry mutters half somnolent of Mancunian Key's drought, Billy coils with a sigh that rends the quietude, Jenkins' cookery braced like a tutelary idol, the bay a tenuous arc in the strife's deluge. Tommy contemplates in the sable's confessional, Sal's epistles cowslip powder in billet book, Ma's scrawl of hearths, the weaver's shuttle a wraith melody gainst the prawn's dirge endurance's fortune a coin spun clement in the jet. Haze rolls dense from the lowlands, cloaking the parapet in clement amnesia, the salient's quietude profounding to cradle the weary, pulses abating from midnight's alloy-strung filament to the funkhole's pliant clasp. Feel the all-clear's exhalation in your lungs, listener, haze's chilled drift a tender pall, dugouts throng a consoling mass, softening the night's levee to breathed abatement. Whole welcomes weary Osseous at length, visions beckon tender via the mist, yet the gyre's pivot hints at renewal's subdued rouse. The funkhole's chaff yields like clement loam, Tommy coiling into the greatcoat's warp lair, its mass a comrade's arm-wound flank, Myers' crust flaking tender as the haze's premier caress, while the dugout seals gainst the pre-Madden's frigidity, Sump's drip waning to a cadence akin to spade on Lancashire's slate, respirations attuning in the section's huddled current. Repose claims piecemeal, the strife's pilferer bequeathing shards, vision's voyage to meadows verdant as May's covenant, thickets hawthorn silver where Sal's merriment scatters corollas like tinsel, the weaver's shuttle a symphony milder than Vicar's bark roams rent by the salient cicatrix, yet vivid in the Myers interregnum, where the trench's gyre spins eternal, Madden's right to crepuscule's roost, Dole's niggard grace, vigils that fray the sable to tatters. The ampler strife's umbra looms even in somnolence, Passchendaele's phantoms marching interminable, October's premier span a gleaning of 70,000 souls in prong and pock, Hague's wastage a quern pulverizing realms to powder, the salient's bow a hopper for the cascade, Ypres Carillon's tolling faint for the unnumbered lost. Tommy stirs half awake, the SNLE's stock a chill companion at grasp, Psyche replaying the diurnal's roster, Char's scald, Shell's ululation, Epistles ink Endurance's tacit roster, Fortune's coin spun clement in the jet. Comrade's contours anchor the vision, Harry's snore a Mancunian foghorn, Billy's drone of Weaver Lass's fillets, Jenkins' respiration steady as Indochina's Ganges, the section akin forged in the funkhole's throng, bonds denser than sanguine in the strife's dispassionate gullet. Post-17's attrition, where Langmark loomed like winter's lupin, mire profounder than Barrows, gyres a blur of front to succor, reposes boon as succinct, Madden's reveille a pilferer at the threshold, yet in this quietude, it burgeons ephemeral, phantasms of Blighty's paths, where gas mantles burgeon and telegraphs chant of armistice's rumor, the Kaiser's throne toppling and Commons jape. Haze thickens without, cloaking the prong in clement alabaster, no man's land of visionary's canvas, pox plain to pastures in the psyche's tender forge. The salient exhales, howls queries defying the ordnance, a wagtail's trill auguring spring's defiance, the trench a cradle rocked by remote crumps that wane to gale's reminiscence. Tommy voyages profounder, the greatcoat's cowl a pillow's throne, pulse's cadence slowing to the sump's perpetual drip, Endurance's fortune a berserk's gainst the gyre's pivot. Madden's ashen digits creep the skyline, Haze's clasp loosening laggard, the funkhole's quietude a refuge succinct gainst the renewal's summons. Let the Myers vision enfold you,